So we are now recording. Welcome to Kimmie's Recovery Zone. Kimmie's Recovery Zone is a nonprofit organization that is also a recovery community organization and governed by representatives of local communities of recovery. That's treatment centers, hospitals, recovery residences, individuals that are related to recovery. And what we do is we organize recovery-focused policy advocacy activities, carry out recovery-focused community education outreach programs, such as this one that you're here with tonight, and then provide peer-based recovery support services. I would like to say that this organization is not in any way related to or endorsed by any 12-step organization or program, as they don't do that stuff. We do fundraising, and I will put information for that at the end of the session. But I want to just say thank you again for being here. And this is the fourth session of Alcoholism, Addiction, the Family. We started on March 2nd. We've got 6 Tuesdays, so this is session 4. And the primary audience are people who have been impacted to the disease, having tried to impart understanding and knowledge for those who turn to their loved ones and say, why can't you just stop? And don't understand the concepts about how addiction is a disease. They don't know how to effectively support their loved one and what the effect and impact of addiction is having on themselves. And we hope to remove the hopelessness that people feel about the future of the loved ones, not only the primary addict, but all the loved ones in the family and those surrounding in their universe. The topics that we've been covering are the disease concept and chemical dependency. We covered that in the first session. Family systems and family roles, and we touched on codependency and signs and symptoms in the third session. Family system, family roles was the second session. By the way, I would like to say that on the Recovery Zone website, those first 3 sessions are up, and you can watch the YouTube. If you really have a dire need to try to fill 1 hour of your day or week, and believe me, I appreciate it if you do, because there's a tremendous amount of information there. Tonight is focused going to be on all about codependency. And we're going to be, next week, we're going to be talking about communication skills and secrets and stashes. And then we're going to spend the 6th session going into depth about pathways to healing for the family and hopefully, and how the loved one helps as well. Again, tonight is all about codependency. There's going to be a tremendous amount of information here. Something I would like to say is that it may seem redundant a lot of times. So I hope that, forgive me with all the ums too, I just really want to get this clear, is that there's a lot of stuff here. And there's a very strong likelihood that as family members here, you're going to see some things about yourself. What I want you to know is that we're going to point out stuff, but I'm going to bring this back full circle and show this as it's how important when we talk about the effect and impact of addiction on the family, that you understand that awareness and education of what's going on here is the first step in the pathway of healing and understanding what's going on with you and your loved ones and how you fit into the scheme of things here. So awareness really is one of the best tools in the journey of healing and recovery. So I will do my best to monitor the chat. So if you have any questions or if I'm going too fast, I will try to get through this and address what you have up there in the chat, either when I can, or I'll let you know that we're coming up to it. A lot of questions that you're going to have are going to be answered throughout this. I raise up a lot of stuff. So I just want you to know that I am very aware of how this affects everybody. The other part is that when we, my experience of doing family programs is I'm used to having the whole family, families and the addicts themselves, alcoholics, the dependent person as well, all in the room together, because sometimes there's a tremendous amount of energy. So there are going to be times I'm going to try and see if I can kind of create some of that energy. So I know that you have the chance. I don't right now because I'm sharing the screen, but I know you have the chance to kind of see each other. And I hope that you kind of do. If you can turn your cameras on if you'd like. You're not going to be on the recording at this juncture. So I do want to stress that part. And, you can kind of see each other there as well when we go over things. So I'd like to try to have some of that energy of connection that is so vital in when we do a family program. So I found this, I spend way too much time on the internet, but I love this because I have seen this before, but I just happen to like the picture because it's a boat and a water and stuff. Codependency is driven by the agreement that I will work harder on your problem and your life than you do. This is not love, okay? This is something that is going to be a theme that you're going to be seeing throughout everything that we're going to be covering tonight. So as an introduction, what I'd like to do is that, people aren't there. A lot of people don't understand what codependence is. And they want to know, am I codependent? Whatever. If you're in a relationship with somebody who, actually, if you're in a relationship, it's already has a level of dependency and codependency. And I'm going to come up in a little bit of that about what the difference between a healthy dependence and an unhealthy codependence is. So there isn't, it's such a broad definition. It's not a diagnosable disease. And what I want you to start thinking about is that there is a pathway out of codependence. So just be mindful of that. All right. The first hallmark of codependence is that they have an excessive and unhealthy tendency to rescue and take responsibility for other people. Excuse me. They derive a sense of purpose and boost your self-esteem through extreme self-sacrifice to satisfy the needs of others. They choose to enter and stay in lengthy, high-cost caretaking and rescuing relationships despite the costs to themselves or themselves or others. They regularly try to engineer, change of everyone around them. And they consider everybody troubled, under-functioning, and that their problems are much bigger in their heads than it is in reality. So they want you to believe that they believe that you don't have the ability to fix any problem you're having. They attract low-functioning people looking for someone to take care of them so they can avoid adult responsibility or consequences to attract people in perpetual crisis. These are the dependent persons that are dependent on a substance or having a mental illness, and we're going to get into this. So they manipulate people to start getting their needs met so they can avoid all the responsibilities that they're supposed to have. And they have a pattern of engaging in well-intentioned but ultimately unproductive and unhealthy helping behaviors, such as enabling. So the dependency goes both ways. It's the dependent person is dependent on the enabler is dependent on is codependent on the addict or alcoholic, and thus starts the cycle. So here's some characteristics. Codependency is a learned behavior. It is not biological. It is not a disease. It is not genetic. Well, in a way, it's environmentally genetic. If somebody's growing up in a household, they're going to start developing patterns and traits. So it gets passed down from one generation to another. And, it is an emotional behavioral condition, but it is not like I said, it's not a diagnosable disease. It affects an individual's ability to have a healthy, mutual, satisfying relationship. It is also known as relationship addiction. You're going to find that they're looking for, they look for others to fix. So they stay um, in destructive or abusive relationships, and there are things called battered wife syndrome or battered spouse syndrome now, where people just can't feel the need to leave because they actually believe it's their fault. They think that maybe this time, the denial, and again, we're going to be getting into these things. Who does codependency affect? It affects anyone who is close to a person dependent on a mood altering substance. They are also partners in their chemical dependency. They may be addicts and alcoholics themselves. Persons living with or in some form of a relationship with an addicted person. And that relationship could be family relationship, a sibling, a son, a daughter, a parent. It could be a person living with a spouse, significant other, and people in relationships with chronically or mentally ill individuals. This is also important because substances are not always the problem, the primary, or there are comorbid problems. We talked about that last week, but there are issues with, dual diagnoses, comorbidities, co-occurring disorders, anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, bipolar disorders, where substance use is one of the symptoms of those as well, but they both have to be treated as primary. So it's very important to understand that, and substance use is a mental health problem. And here's the kicker: any codependent person from any dysfunctional family. And this is very important because what we're going to be doing is we're going to get into the code, what a dysfunctional family is. And this is the characteristics of what a dysfunctional family is. This is the definition. A dysfunctional family is one in which members suffer from fear, anger, pain, or shame that is ignored or denied. Now, remember, if you were here last week, and I've also said it a couple of times, the 3 primary rules in a family, and we're going to get into this. We'll see this as part of characteristics and symptoms, signs and symptoms of codependency is don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. You're not allowed to talk to anybody about what's going on in the household. You can't tell the truth. Don't trust anybody because they're out there to fix you. And so the recognition of things that are, when people are trying to help and fix, the distortions that happen and emotional responses are off the charts. Do not acknowledge this is the characteristics inside of a codependent family. A dysfunctional family, excuse me. They do not acknowledge that problems exist. They don't talk about them or cry. They repress their emotions and disregard their needs. They become survivors. They develop behaviors that help them they perpetuate the negative responses. They're detaching not only from others, but they detach from themselves. They don't talk, they don't touch, they don't confront, they don't feel, they don't trust. Their identity and emotional development are inhibited. They become attached to the disease. And it's all about protecting the family secret, which is either the dependence use or what's going on in the family. So that energy and attention is all about the dependent person in the family. They'll sacrifice their own needs to take care of that person who is sick. And also, as other family members become sick, they begin to the point where they take care of each other so that nothing is disrupted. And remember, we talked about the mobile that hangs gently, and when there's a wind blowing, it just, it goes out of things, but it comes back to its things, and a really bad wind, but it still comes back to its home, its equilibrium. But when there's an addict, pulling everything down and the family dysfunction is there, that mobile is rigid. and cannot move and is not going to change and does not have the normal equilibrium. It has a dysfunctional equilibrium. Dysfunctional family members place other people's health, welfare, and safety before their own, and they lose contact with their own needs, desires, and sense of self. Which leads us to how do codependent people behave? Codependents have low self-esteem and look for anything outside of themselves to make themselves feel better. And they'll do this. They will. It's all about denial and distraction. They have good intentions because they're trying to take care of a person who's having trouble, but the caretaking becomes compulsive and defeating. And the problem is that these repeated rescue attempts become such a destructive course of behavior and how progressive it becomes, that it becomes even more unhealthy. And it, as the dependent person's disease progresses, so does the codependency in the family members. And then they view themselves as victims and are attracted to that same weakness in the love and friendship. They start finding that same type of relation in other relationships. When they start evolving out of the family, they're going to find that same stuff, but they're going to take that behavior pattern and they're going to bring it with them. And this is the cycle of codependency. A codependent relationship is when one partner needs the other partner, who in turn needs to be needed. So you've got the dependent person who needs to be enabled, and you've got the enabler who needs to be needed. And this just goes back and forth. And that part of that back and forth is that no matter how bad it gets, it always like, oh, I'm sorry, I'll try and do better this time. And it just becomes this great big ball of progressive destruction. The codependent self-esteem, and self-worth will come only from, this is the part of the progression, will come only from sacrificing themselves to their partner, who's only too glad to receive their sacrifices. And one or both parties can be, the codependency is both parties. It's not a one-sided thing, regardless of how, even that person's ignorance of the person who is the enabler or the one who is needing to try to fix them, that is a form of manipulation. And the codependent person will put everything aside to make sure that that main focus is always on the substance dependent person. And the dedication of this one person is going to cause damage to other relationships they have in their lives, their careers or education paths, their everyday responsibilities, everything that they're supposed to be doing, the chores, the household, the maintenance, just everything, their hygiene, is probably, their self-care goes out the window. So a dependent person, a positively dependent, this is where the healthy dependence is when two people rely on each other for support and love, and both find value in the nature of their relationship. They coexist well. They, humorously we say they can finish each other's sentences, but there's no back and forth. There's no out of balance. I was taught once, and I love this, is that nobody can have more than 50% of the relationship. When it gets either less or more, we're losing the balance, and there's that tilt in the mobile. Healthy dependency, both parties make their relationship a priority. And it's not I'm making your relationship a priority. I'm making our relationship a priority. I'm not only looking at what your needs are, but I'm also being able to communicate what my needs are. But we also do stuff together. We're growing, we're evolving, and finding joy and share in joy and sadness. Sometimes there's grief that's important to think about. And both people can express their emotion, needs, and find ways to make it beneficial for both. They know how to communicate. They know how to express. There's no huffing and puffing. There's no, oh, nothing. What's wrong? Nothing. I'm fine. I don't know if anybody knows what the definition of fine is as an acronym, but it's freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. So I'm fine. If you guys ever want to see something really funny, go on YouTube and Google, it's not about the nail. And that's a very interesting one about denying needs. In a codependent relationship, in an unhealthy codependent relationship, the codependent feels worthless unless they're needed, unless they're making sacrifices. Because if you don't make sacrifices, I'm not getting any satisfaction. I have to be needed. My whole thing is about here is to be for you. I don't count. I don't matter. You might as well just put a big, welcome over my face and be a doormat. The codependent has no personal identity, interests, or values outside of that relationship. That's scary. And when somebody's losing their own identity, but just to be the submissive in that relationship, that's very unhealthy, and the progression is reaching new stages. And that codependent is the person who feels that their desires and needs are unimportant. They don't have any self-worth, self-esteem, self-respect, self-confidence. And they don't see that. And when we get to that don't talk, don't trust, don't feel part, and don't communicate and let other people try to help you, it's because other people are seeing it before you do, or that person does, and will just deny and refuse. And we'll see in a little bit how they start detaching and isolating and avoiding others, because it's all about what's going on under the roof. So the signs and symptoms of codependency are this is going to be plentiful here, by the way. There's a lot of stuff in on this. So I just want you to know. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. Codependency does not constitute a diagnosable mental health condition. Again, there is no disease called codependency. And I'm just trying to get this off the screen here. And I got to bear with me for a moment. I got to play with this so that it works. Okay, good. The primary symptoms associated with codependency may be people-pleasing behaviors. And we're going to get into that because there's so many things that are, enmeshment is a really big word describing codependent relationships. So all the symptoms are enmeshed as well. And the people-pleasing behaviors about sacrificing yourself, not saying no, doing things, needing validation and approval, because it all comes from my attention to you and to others in the primary family. When we talked about the roles, the family roles last week, you got the hero. First, you got the enabler who's trying to manage everything. And you've got the hero child who says, I'll help, whose line was, I'll help with that. I'll take care of that. Going in and trying to, help mediate almost in a way. Now the scapegoat's out of here. The lost child just is off. And then you got the mascot. Hey, trying to be the clown and holding everybody together, get everybody to laugh, bring the spirits up. Not saying anything negative, because if they say anything negative, they're going to get repressed and shut down right away. And they don't want to do that. So their behavior is a form of rescuing. Excuse me. The codependent also has poor boundaries. They fear being alone or without an intimate partner. And that when an intimate partner does not necessarily mean sex, it's that closeness, that bond of the depth of a relationship that one wants to have, that level of intimacy other than sex. And they deny their own desires and emotions. And we'll get into the stuff about intimacy, because sex is a big thing as well when it comes to codependency, and I'll get into that later. There's going to be a lot of stuff here. These are some of the things where not everything that is going to be on this list is that everybody has to possess, but you'll find that in a codependent relationship, they have a lot of them. So there's perfectionism, fear of failure. And it's really that fear of failure is more about the consequences of an action, that if it's perceived as a failure, how they receive it. And that's a sensitivity to criticism, but it's not about it just could be anything. The criticisms could just be coming, out at the person. When we talked about the signs and symptoms last week of the dependence of what's going on in the family, one of the things that the dependent is their fears and not wanting to reveal their denial is manifested by abusing, verbally or emotionally abusing others. So that causes a lot of the sensitivity that I'm talking about. Their denial of their own personal problems, the excessive focus on everyone else. And, it's like, if there's not enough going on here, I'm going to find something else to fill in the hole here. And, it's constantly about helping others, not self. Again, failure to meet personal needs, the discomfort with receiving attention from help or others. Wow. When somebody actually tries to help, they're like, they don't know how to handle that. And it's very uncomfortable for them because they lose control. They have feelings of guilt or responsibility when others are in pain, and has absolutely nothing to do with them. They demonstrate reluctance to share their own thoughts or feelings for fear of it might offend somebody else or conjure up something out of somebody else. Their self-esteem is just non-existent. They've internalized shame and helplessness. Now, again, guilt is something you feel that you bring upon yourself. Shame is something that you receive from others, their judgments, their values, their beliefs, their limitations, their consequences, their perceptions, everything, their universe, their standards. And if they don't meet you, that's why the expression shame on you. So I'm putting shame on you. The codependent person is internalizing what people are giving them as a result of their actions. And it becomes manifests in a way of helplessness. Their projection of competence and self-reliance is just non-existent. They try to say that they can do everything and that they're doing fine and they can take care of themselves, but it really truly is non-existent. They always have a need to control others. The controlling is very, telling people how they should feel or think. Being resentful when somebody says, I will not, I don't need any help, I can do this myself. And it's like, no. They freely offer advice and directions without being asked. They use sex as a way of manipulating and having control. And they have to be needed to be in a relationship. Their self-worth is all based on caretaking. They have they feeling undeserving. No, it's not, I don't need to be happy. I'm happy when I'm taking care of you. I don't need it. It's not really, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you. They're very, they placate all over the place, patronize. And they care for and enable someone who abuses drugs or alcohol. I mean, that's the classic enabler. We get into the characteristics of this is that it's a person belonging to a dysfunctional, one-sided relationship where one person relies on the other for meeting nearly all of their emotional needs and self-esteem needs. It also describes a relationship that enables another person to maintain their responsible, addictive, and underachieving behavior. So this is another view of codependency as saying that it's one-sided because it's all about the person helping the person who is underachieving or addicted, but yet that underachieving addicted person is making it so that the person who is wanting to caretake and give them and take care of them the opportunity to do so. So that's something that we want to make sure that is clear. It's another way of saying the same thing that it really is. It may be perceived as one-sided because by the codependent, because it's not about them. I have to make sure I take care of them. But what's happening is that other person who is the receiving of that is manipulating and controlling them and their behavior. So the biggest, the most, excuse me, the most important one here is low self-esteem. That feeling that you're not good enough or compare yourself to others. Those are the outward signs of low self-esteem. People pleasing, being compliant, usually don't think they have a choice. Saying no causes them anxiety. They have very poor boundaries. They feel responsible for other people's feelings and problems or blame their own on somebody else. I mean, the whole thing about boundaries is, going around and around with, how you, you broach into other people's, like giving advice when not asked. There's so many different, just being, forcing yourself on others. They become closed off and withdrawn, and they make it hard for people to get close to them. So the other side is that they're trying to get involved, and the other part is that they're trying to stay away. So, they don't know that gray area of boundaries, or they've got the walls up in the wrong places and the gates open in the wrong places. They're very reactive. And the reactivity manifests in anger, fear, denial, and is another one of those boundary destroyers. Caretaking, that's just says it all for themselves. The controlling limits their ability to take risks and share their feelings. They won't take a risk on themselves to feel better, to break free from the bondage of what's going on in that relationship. But they also use it to control and manipulate others as well. And you'll find that especially some codependents, especially the ones who are who are addicts themselves and in that part of that or have an issue, manipulation is a very big tool to be able to get what they want as far as getting their needs met. Dysfunctional communication, I mean, this one just kind of says it by itself. They don't communicate their thoughts, their feelings, and needs. They're not going to talk about what's really going on. They're not going to talk about it in those closest. They're not going to talk about it with people out, and they're certainly not going to talk about it to the dependent. The obsession of how much time they spend thinking about other people or other relationships rather than the one they have about themselves and their own needs. The dependency that they have of need other people to like them, to feel okay about themselves. It's really twisted here. This is a real gray area that's really challenging because they always need to be in a relationship. You've probably seen some people that just they never have been alone. They go from one relationship to another relationship. And you find that the dependent person or one of the dependent persons, will do this as well. It's like they'll always, they may break free for a minute and, trottle off to detox, and then all of a sudden they're in a relationship before they get out of detox. Or when the dependent person leaves on the other side of this, a dependent person just says, I'm out of here, and takes off. And this person finds another person who needs to be needed. And they do it, it's like they've got a radar for it. And they go right to it. Denial. It's a common thread throughout all of this. They always think the problem is someone else or the situation. They deny their feelings and needs. They pay attention to other people's needs and not their own. And they're in denial of their own vulnerability and their own need for love and intimacy in its purest form, not their perception of what love and intimacy is, because that is so thwarted by all these behaviors and the progression of the the behaviors that have gone on for, and in a lot of cases, since childhood. The problems with intimacy, and I say here, not sex, being open and close with someone in an intimate relationship, fear that they'll be judged, and it's, really, really problematic. That they're going to be rejected, they're going to be left, like that person I just said, that, oh no, they left me, now what do I do? And they got to find another relationship because they fear, and then the other person is like, it's too much, I'm getting smothered here. But who am I? I don't get any, I have no identity, no self-worth, no value. About the sex stuff, I want to get into this real quickly. This is a problem that they're caretaking in the bedroom. They have sex when they don't want to. They have sex when they'd rather be held, nurtured, or loved. They try to have sex when they're angry or hurt to manipulate and control the situation. Or they refuse to have sex when they're angry or hurt because they're angry at the person. They use sex as control, as I said. They don't know how to ask for what they need when they're in bed. How do they meet their needs? How do I be a partner in this? They withdraw emotionally. They feel revulsion. They don't talk about it. They force them to have sex anyway, force themselves to have sex anyway. They reduce sex to a technical act. They wonder why they don't enjoy sex. They lose interest in sex. They make up reasons to abstain. So that's the sex side of it. But there is no intimacy in anything that I just said there. It's no connection. It's just all a behavior and how it manifests this way. So codependency creates stress and leads to painful emotions. Shame and low self-esteem, which create anxiety and fear about being judged, rejected, or abandoned, about making mistakes, about being a failure, about feeling trapped or being close to being alone. So we're talking about self-worth, self-respect, self-confidence, self-esteem. Pick a self. There is no self-care here. And the other symptoms lead to feelings of anger and resentment on the other side, depression, hopelessness, and despair. And the numbness that comes, just nothing, the nothingness. You'll see this in some people. You'll see it in other people. You're like, what happened? Where did they go? Where are you? Are you inside there? Tom, where are you? Tom, are you there? And it's scary. Codependency involves a habitual system of thinking, feeling, and behaving towards ourselves and others that cause pain. This is the progression. This is where it's constant. It's going on and on. All right. The thing is that unlike the progression of a disease where they hit a bottom, this is something that keeps going on and they may not hit that bottom. It's not a classic bottom because there's always that comparison to the dependent, the person who's substance dependent. And the codependent behaviors or habits are self-destructive. They can lead to suicide. They'll definitely lead to a form of addiction or compulsive behavior as a superficial satisfaction. Codependence and denial cannot adjust to the relationship changes that occur when their partner begins recovery. I think when we did the thing about the family roles and I had everybody saying their lines and stuff, and I quietly took the dependent out of the picture and put them in treatment, but yet the family's still sitting doing all the same things. I'll fix that. Let me tell you a joke. I'll take care of that. I'm out of here. If they're not getting any help, the likelihood of that person who went to treatment to come back into that system the likelihood of them staying sober is impossible, or close to impossible. But the things is that if the codependent doesn't get help, this is why family programs are absolutely vital in substance use disorder treatment. Because if we're not making everybody healthy, it's all going to blow up. because the other underlying co-occurring disorders are not only happening just with the person who is substance dependent, the anxiety, the fear, the depression, the shame, the guilt that are going on with the codependents are exponential in these situations. They move on to other addictive relationships so they can continue to cling to their own dysfunctional. You know, we hear about people coming home saying, you know what, why am I in this relationship? I'm out of here, I'm gone, and they get divorced. And meanwhile, this person here who has been the codependent has nothing. Their whole identity evolved around taking care of that person. So now what do? They find someone else to take care of. And believe me, they find them. I watch it happen all the time. I hear about it all the time. And the controlling codependent is often lost without someone to blame, fix, and control. That loss of identity, that loss of autonomy, that loss, the denial, everything that's in there. It's like, you know, it's amazing how rooted these behaviors and emotions and feelings become. And again, how many times have you heard of people who leave one alcoholic only to enter a relationship with another one? Heavy duty stuff here. But how do we recover? How do we heal? We can, we will. And it comes from the awareness first of identifying whether or not you're codependent. Now, there's a checklist here, and you're going to find out who I got it from when I finish this, but ask yourselves these questions. This is a good checklist about, am I a codependent? Do I feel responsible for other people? Do I feel compelled to help people solve their problems or take care of their feelings? How can you take care of their feelings? Nobody can take care of somebody else's feelings. I can only take care of how I feel because my feelings are mine and you can't fix my feelings. And we're going to get into that when we get into the communication exercise next week about feelings and expressing them. And that's really important. Do you find it easier to feel and express anger about injustices done to others than about injustices done to you? Do you feel safest and most comfortable when you are giving to others? Do you feel insecure and guilty when someone gives to you? Think of that. Do you feel safest when you're giving to others, but insecure and guilty when somebody gives something to you? Classic. Do you feel empty, bored, and worthless if you don't have someone to take care of, or a problem to solve, or a crisis to deal with? I can take care of this. I can fix it. This is what I'm really good at. Let me fix you. I got this. I can take care of this. And just as I'm doing now, are you unable to stop talking, thinking, and worrying about other people and their problems? You could become a counselor. The hyperactivity that comes from a person who is out of control is a very common occurrence. It's a manifestation of anxiety. It's a manifestation of fear. It's a manifestation of stress, of how do I deflect off my own thought and work and get to something else? Do you lose interest in your own life when you are in love? Remember I said nobody can have more than 50% of a relationship? Okay. Do you start putting more into a relationship than you should? Do you take more out of it? That healthy dependency, finding that balance, being able to find joy in each other's lives, understanding that you can express your needs, knowing what, it's not about what you need for your relationship, it's what we need, our relationship, togetherness. Do you stay in relationships that don't work or tolerate abuse in order to keep people loving you? This is a very big thing in domestic violence and emotional abuse that goes on, physical and emotional abuse and under the roofs of stuff. This is also, I just have to give a side thing here. This pandemic has caused all sorts of issues that are raised that you're reading here about people who are isolated in relationships and at home with others. Or do you ever leave a bad relationship only to form a new one that didn't work either? This is something that happens. And Melody Beattie, the author of Codependent No More. Codependent No More and The Language of Letting Go are Bibles for the pathways out of codependency. They're fantastic books. So, and you know, I quote Melody all the time. And you know, she's like got 10% of my Instagram memes. And she developed this checklist out of Codependent No More. And this is a great self-check to look at this, to look at yourselves in this. So if you see yourself in any of these, that's a good start. How do we recover? Okay, we have to shift our relationship with ourselves. If we have to let go of people in our lives who are willing to work through their issues as opposed to us working their issues, you got to fire them. Firing the people we were codependent with may be part of that. And you have to remember, codependency is about ourselves, not them. Because if I start worrying about them, I'm still in my codependency. I have to take that away and shed it, because recovery from codependency is all about learning to take responsibility for my actions, my feelings, my behaviors, my issues, and my life. I love this quote by this marriage and family therapist in Pennsylvania. Codependency can be difficult to change alone, as codependent behaviors are often learned early on and reinforced over many years. Again, this is a learned behavior, and that depression and self-esteem and anxiety can all be altered through quality self-care. And it's breaking the patterns of behaviors. And it's very challenging to do that. But it takes work, it takes dedication, but it takes willingness to let somebody help you. So if you suspect you're in a codependent relationship or that you're codependent, there's the therapy, self-help and support groups like Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, Codependence Anonymous, CODA. There's Families Anonymous as well. If you belong to a church, connecting with others, talk to some of the people that you're closest to. You'd be very surprised. If you work for a large corporation, go to your EAP website. They will have stuff there that you can look up and research on your own. So this is what part of that pathway to healing, and this is what the therapist will help work on, is that it improves self-care. Because you've been focusing on the needs of others for so long, you got pushed aside, and that's a progressive and dangerous place to be. Learn how to set boundaries. Now, when I tell somebody about boundaries, the first rule about boundaries is do not tell somebody else what your boundary is with them, because they're going to come crashing through it like a tank in a movie. Setting limits with others forces them to learn to take responsibility for themselves. It forces them self-reliance, but it also forces the codependent into self-reliance. And they start learning how to take care of themselves instead of somebody else. The difference between fixing somebody and giving support. Oh, this is huge. I'm going to fix you. No, I'll support you with you. Yeah, that's really a good idea. Why don't you give that a try? See how that works for you. And then let me know. Okay? Maybe I can help you come up with some options for yourself. It's all a communication thing. Empathetic listening and encouragement. But fixing is swooping in and solving problems. Helping others in productive ways. Okay? You're not making somebody's disease progress by buying them booze or covering for them. Okay. If you have a need to help others, go volunteer. There's plenty of people out there that really need help. And you're going to find that when you volunteer somewhere, you've got somebody supervising you to tell you how to do it well, so that you're not only helping them, you're actually helping yourself. And, you know, it's a healthy relationship, taking care of somebody that way. Learning about family patterns, what you're doing here. Understanding about family roles, systems, rules, the disease concept, how it's affecting everybody. This is a great step in learning about how unhealthy codependent patterns develop in everybody. And you'll be able to see, you'll understand this question that we use in recovery. It says, if you spot it, you got it. And what you start seeing in others, you'll see in yourself. And it'll make sense of how these relationships exist, how they interact with each other. And like that in the mobile, it's the people are the things on the mobile, but the rules and the engagement and all the structure are in those rods and strings that control the equilibrium of the components of the mobile. Codependents have as much difficulty accepting their powerlessness over people and events as alcoholics and addicts have regarding their powerless over the drug of choice. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over, and our lives had become unmanageable. Very important. It really takes that, you got to get to that place where it really becomes all about you or themselves. To let go of the need to control people, to control people, to control places, events, is very challenging. Okay, and I mean, this isn't step 1, 2, or 3. This isn't a step thing. I referred to step 1 because that admission of powerlessness is the beginning of the process and the recognition of unmanageability. And how do we do this? We let go. We start understanding it's like, I can't control people. I can't control the places they go to. I can't control the events that are going on. And I'm going to start breaking that pattern. And I'm going to not take on that shame that you're projecting on me that creates fear inside of me. And it's not worth it for me to try to take care of you when you don't really care. And when I find out is that I'm the one that doesn't care about me. I have to start caring about me. Your life is self-directed. You'll find your way through life by personal control, good decision-making, and independence. Independence, not codependence, not just dependence, independence, freedom. One of the promises, we'll come to know a new freedom and a new happiness. The decision making is no longer based on emotions, impulsive behaviors, compulsive behaviors, and because again, I'll ask you, just think about this for yourselves for a second. You can all look at each other while you're doing this. How many times have you made a decision based on an emotion, and how did it turn out? And the predominant answer is usually not so good. So you learn that personal control. There are pathways to healing, and we can break the chain of codependence. The choices you make are yours and yours alone. And the choice you make today about being here and learning about these things is a great choice that's going to help lead to personal control, good decision making, and independence. I thank you very much, and very grateful that you're all here. Eric, thank you very much for putting up the thing about Codependent No More, how to get to that, the purchase in Amazon. And at this time, I'm going to stop recording. So again, thank you. I did put up there about go to Kimmie's recovery